Interviewing is one of those things that everybody thinks they already know how to do, but I guarantee you can get better. I'm going to talk in another video about the 5 different interview styles, and that's really important because the type of interview you're doing makes a huge difference in how you plan and conduct your next interview. But right now, I want to talk about 4 keys to making your interviews better. Whether you're interviewing for a podcast, a testimonial, a vlog, a video production, a documentary, it doesn't matter. These skills will apply to all of those. The first is prep, but it's a different way of looking at prep than you may be looking at it now. The second is energy, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. The third is what I call time hop, and the fourth may be the most important of all. So one part of your prep is going to happen once you meet the guest, just before you turn the camera or the recorder on. And I'll talk about that later. But first I want to talk about the pre-interview prep. So before a guest even shows up, there's a little bit of prep you should do. I'm sure you're already doing the basic prep. You're doing research. You're watching their speaker reel. You're reading their book if they've got one. But here's another thing I want you to do. I want you to think about the ultimate why behind your interview. What is it that you want to find out from this person? What is it that this person knows that your interview needs to understand? Having that guiding direction, that guiding North Star will be tremendously helpful in your interview. The second prep you want to do, in addition to the basic research, I like to open my podcast app and I like to search under their name and see whether my guest has been a guest on other podcasts or interview shows. The reason I do this is it helps me to see whether they think on their feet, how nimble they are, how they answer questions, what kind of vibe they have, their sense of humor, their personality. All that is going to help me get in the right mood for when I start to do the interview. Even if I'm working with a host, this will help me to greet the guest and to prep the host. Now here's the real key. The real key is the prep that you do after the guest arrives. When you sit down with that guest, whether it's in person, whether it's over Zoom, a phone call, Squadcast, or any other app, once you sit down with your guest before the camera or the recorder rolls, talk to them. Explain to them what you're looking for. They want to be successful, and they want to understand what you want from them. Do you want long answers, short answers? Is it a casual conversation or more formal? Will there be a lot of editing, or will it be more of a free-form live conversation? Who's your audience? What are they interested in? What kinds of issues interest them? Help guide your guests so that they can be successful. Many interviewers I work with resist this step. They feel like it's somehow making the interview less natural. But I promise you, your guest wants to succeed, and your audience wants your guest to succeed. And the best way to do that is to let them know what you're looking for. The next is energy, and energy is so important. The energy that you give feeds your interviewing guest. Whether it's for testimonials or documentaries or podcast interviews, the energy you give is the energy you will receive. I'm going to give you a couple of concrete examples of that. Lead with the feelings you want to receive. I once worked with a ski area marketing director. He knew exactly what he wanted for this testimonial. And he had brought in a family that loved his mountain. And they wanted nothing more than to speak about how great the experience was for them. But this marketing director was so focused on the points he needed the family to make that he was very serious and very detailed and very studious in the energy he was giving off. And he just wasn't getting the results he wanted from the family. I asked if I could jump in. I knew very little about the ski area and I knew very little about the family, but I knew about the energy we were looking for. And when I got behind the camera, I brought the smile, I brought the energy, I brought the encouragement, and we were able to get an incredible testimonial that was true and honest and reflected the way that family really felt about the experience. But here's another example in the opposite direction. When I was working on the documentary Floodbound about Hurricane Irene, and I was working with a family who had really been intensely affected emotionally by the experience. I don't know if you've experienced this, but sometimes when people feel intense emotions, they're tempted to release them or to avoid them with a laugh or an awkward smile. Well, this guest was doing just that. It took everything within my power not to let myself or him off the hook, not to laugh, to stay calm, to look in his eyes, to accept that moment and that intense emotion. And I will tell you that at that point, Instead of laughing, it brought that guest to the real tears that he was feeling. He was able to express his true emotions. Again, the energy that you bring is the energy that you will receive. I know I told you that the fourth key was the most important, and I think it is, but honestly, they're all super important. So here's number 3. It's what I call time hop. And that's this skill that we can practice to be in the future and at the same time be intensely present in the now. What do I mean by that? When you're interviewing, you always need to be thinking ahead. You need a series of questions in your back pocket. You need to know what questions you want to ask your guest. You don't want to have dead air, you don't want to have awkward silences, and you don't want to have them leave and realize you forgot to ask the most important question. Have a list of questions ready in your back pocket. And that could be literally. There's nothing wrong with having a sheet of paper in your hand while you interview. In fact, it lets the guest know that you're taking this seriously. But here's where the time hop comes in. You need to be fully present in the moment and engaged so that you can ask appropriate follow-up questions. You need to listen with the ears of your audience, and you need to ask the follow-up questions that they need to hear. It doesn't matter. Throw yourself on your sword. Play dumb. You need to get the guest to answer those questions. If there's a story they tell that you know the background to, but your audience doesn't, make sure you dig in and ask those follow-up questions. Always be thinking, what do they want to hear? What's the context of the situation? How can you frame this for your audience's benefit? That means have your questions planned, always be thinking what you're going to ask next, but at the same time, be intensely present and listen with full engagement. Okay, here's the great unveiling. Number 4. Number 4 is wait. This is the key. Ask any documentary filmmaker, ask any journalist. Sitting through the awkward silence is where the magic happens. When you ask your guest a question and they answer, there'll be a moment of silence. If you can bite your tongue and wait through the awkwardness until they come back with the next answer, you will almost always come back with gold. Most of us who are interviewers do it because we love being around people. And if you love being around people, you don't like to see them uncomfortable. And so oftentimes an interviewer will start a question, and when they see that the guest is uncomfortable, they'll jump in to save them. Resist the urge. Wait, take a breath, and you will be rewarded. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share it with your friends, but most important, please leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Ask me questions. Let me know what works and what doesn't. I want to make sure this works for all of us.